Here's how to create custom collisions for your models in under 60 seconds. Start with the original model. Create a low polygon version of your model and break it up into convex shapes. In this case, I broke it up into 5 shapes. Make sure those shapes have a small gap between them so they're not touching. You can see here we left small gaps between the shapes. Name the custom collisions by adding a prefix of uppercase UCX with an underscore, and then a suffix of an underscore, and then sequential numbers starting with 00. So in this case, we have 00, 01, 02, 03, 04. Next, you want to select all of your models, including the original mesh. So in this case, we have 6 objects selected, and export them as you normally would as an FBX, and import into UEFN. Once you import the model into UEFN, the collision components will not be visible, but when you open up an editor session, you'll see that the collisions are working as intended. Once in the testing session, we could see that the collisions are behaving as expected. In this case, we could jump through the inside of this model, climb up or slide down, and mantle on top of it, just as we would expect. And there you go. If you think this helped, that's great. If you want more information, stay, and I'm going to start giving a lot more info. That'll be a little more complete than the 60-second mini tutorial. Okay, so for those that are sticking around, I just wanted to give a little more information and maybe show other examples on collisions that might help you when you're creating your custom collisions for your models. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is where I'm getting most of the information that I'm using for this. So the Unreal Engine docs that has an FBX workflow. It's the FBX static mesh pipeline, which you could search in the Unreal Engine docs. And there is a collision section. And you could see they give you some general guidelines. But basically, I use the UCX workflow where we break the object into convex objects. You can see right here. They give you some examples of what, the difference between concave and convex, and I'll go over that a little bit. And then basically just they go over the naming conventions. They also talk about how for best results, it is best to leave like a small gap between the different collision objects. And they show this little lollipop example. So you could read up on that. Again, you could search up the FBX static mesh pipeline in Unreal Engine, and I'll try to leave the link for that somewhere in the descriptions or wherever it's being posted. The other thing I would recommend watching is this talk from the Unreal Engine YouTube channel, Optimal Collision and Avoiding Common Collision Mistakes. This one doesn't really show you how to set up custom collisions, but it talks about like do's and don'ts about collisions and just some good habits and workflows. It might be a little too much for some people, but I think it's a good watch, and there's like tons of great information. Tina and Dan did an awesome job with this, and I think it was really useful. So in this example, I just threw in some like higher poly areas to show you that in the collision object that I'm making, and I'll turn on the collision parts right here. Let me select them so they're a little easier to see. They're highlighted in wireframe, but you could see on the original mesh, I have like bevels on this mesh. But on the collision, I took those bevels off. You don't want to have that stuff. You want to keep the collision as simple as possible. So basically what I did for this example is I started with a simple box, and I just was able to shape the box into convex shapes that match the outline of my original mesh. And you could see in this one, we have it broken up again into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shapes because I couldn't figure out a way to get it into be less than 5, keeping with only convex. And when you zoom in, you could see I left like a small gap between like these orange lines or the convex or the collision shapes that I created. So I left a small gap in there. When you are exporting your model, make sure you have them all your parts selected. So the original part and then all the collisions, you want to have them all selected. And when you go to export, make sure you're exporting just the selected objects. You want to make sure it's not all your objects, or just do the selected ones so you know that when you're selecting, the correct parts get exported. Just wanted to make sure everyone's clear about what a convex shape is. So basically in a convex shape, if you have a cube would be a convex shape, because if you were inside the cube, you'd be able to see every other part of the cube, like nothing will be blocked. So a lot of times I will do my collision shapes with just a cube and move some of the 4 vertices. If you need to add more geometry to your collision shapes, just be careful. If you start pushing them inside like this becomes concave at this point. So this shape is technically not allowed. I'm not saying it won't work, but they're saying don't use concave shapes. If you were pulling the shape out like this, that would still be convex. Okay, so you want to avoid having shapes that start to look like a C, or they're entering into themselves. But shapes that are getting pushed out, so this shape would still be fine, or a shape like this would be fine. But once you start having a shape that you wouldn't be able to see every part from inside, like if we pull this out too far, this shape would not be okay. So just keep that in mind when you're creating your shapes. Generally, I think the simpler the better. So that's why most of my shapes, like in this example right here, you can see most of them are just 6-sided objects. And on a few of them, I needed to create one extra loop to create some geometry to let me adjust them a little bit. But keep your shapes as simple as possible if you can. That's my recommendation if you're doing, especially on mechanical shapes. On more organic ones, you might need to start adding a lot more geometry and kind of smooth it out. But again, you want to keep it convex if possible. So in this one, let me turn off the collisions. This one looks like kind of like a mechanical part, and I probably wouldn't normally do something with this many polygons on the side, but I wanted to show you that if you had something that was like a higher density mesh like this, where you have a lot of beveling and a lot of areas that are just a higher polygon count, you definitely don't want the collision mesh to be anywhere that dense. So for this case, I'm going to turn off the original mesh. So I broke this one up into 10-sided cylinders, and I just ended up with 3 of them. So as far as the polygon count, it's really, really low compared to what we have in the original mesh. Okay, so this one is much, much higher density. You don't need something this dense for your collision object. That's the main takeaway for this one. So let me hide this one. The next one I have is kind of like custom stairs. I don't even really know what they are, but let's think of them as stairs. So in this case, I have 2 different examples, and I have both of the examples in UEFN. We'll show kind of like the difference with them. One thing that drives me bonkers is when people have collisions on their stairs for each stair, and that causes your character. I don't know if you've ever been in a map when the character's running up the stairs and they're juddering, they're going up and down each stair, and you could feel each stair like as you move up the map, or as you move up that part of the model, and that kind of like drives me crazy. It really should be smoother, in my opinion. It should be smoother. So in this case, I have one collision that I did right here, and you could see it starts from the very beginning of the stairs and it goes to the top, and you can see it's cutting off part of the beginning part of the stairs. But when you walk up this, it'll be really smooth. And the other one that I have is where the collision starts out a little bit further, so the player won't cut into the stairs as much. I guess it depending on your specific use case. So in this case, you wouldn't use both of these options, but you would pick whichever option kind of works better for your map. So let's go in and take a look how these are reflected in the edit session. So back in the edit session, you could see when we had the 10-sided cylinders, as far as the collision, it works perfectly. Like everything is really smooth, and you wouldn't know that the collision is any lower poly than the high poly mesh. And as far as the stairs, this is the first example where you can see when you walk up and down the stairs, the character runs up really, really smooth. It's not going to be juddery, which you do get in maps that have a collision for each stair. In this one, you could see this is the one that the collision starts right at the beginning of the stairs, and you can see the character's feet are kind of cutting into the beginning of the stair. I don't think most people would notice that, but if that's not something you like, you can make the collision start a little bit before the stair. And this one, you can see how it's cutting out a lot less. Maybe a little tip of it is intersecting, but so those are just two options maybe you have for stairs. Or other objects. You may have other objects that you may need some collisions where the character runs up in a smooth way. So again, I hope that could help you keep your collision objects as convex shapes, and make sure you are naming them correctly.